Hi everyone, and welcome to the Shanty Show. Today we're coming at you from the Beyond the Pale brewery in our nation's capital, Ottawa. We were invited down here by the Bytown Sea Shanty Collective. We're going to be performing with them tonight and with our guest, Tom Lewis. Tom is a legend in the shanty world. He's written a ton of songs that you'll know. That's true. He's written down a lot of songs, as we'll cover. And we're going to be talking to him today all about how he got into singing, his history and experiences as a submariner, and of course, how he goes about writing down songs.
So, April 16th, 1943.
April 16th, 1943, day that will live in infamy. Oh no, that was the attack on Pearl Harbor, sorry.
So you come into the world in Belfast?
In Belfast, yes. Either, I would have said at that time, or for a long time afterwards, Belfast, Northern Ireland. But now that I'm living in the Republic, I was born in the north.
What are your earliest memories of music?
My earliest memories of music are coming back from the centre of Belfast on the top deck of a trolley bus. Do we all remember? No, okay.
Before my time.
And surprising my mother by bursting into "Shine on, harvest moon." And I had the melody and the lyric correct, but it only comes into the movie twice. So I had that. And the following Sunday, we started going to church because she thought she could get rid of me for a couple of hours a week if she threw me in a church choir because I could sing. So she would always have the radio on, usually BBC home service or light program. And if there was anyone singing, it didn't matter what the song was or who the person was. It was Vera Lynn or Enrico Caruso, or Frank Sinatra. She would sing along. So I thought that's exactly what the radio was for.
Right.
It was for singing along to. And one of those was Illy-olly-illy-olly-o, cheerily, boys, cheerily. One of the programs they had on Children's Hour was a children's soap opera, which went week to week to week, called Green Sailors. The intro and outro music for that was played on a piano accordion, which I didn't know at the time. I just knew it was music. And there was this lovely lilting melody, but the BBC sound engineers had woven into this the sounds of ropes slapping and masts creaking and seagulls crying and wind sighing through the rigging, all the rest of it. So I would have been listening to that when I was about 8 and 9 years old. So cut forward another 8 or 9 years, and I am in engineering apprentice school at HMS Caledonia in Rosyth, which is just a short bus ride away from Dunfermline, where all the good stuff is. And there was a folk club there, so this would be 1961, and I started going to this folk club, and one of the early guests was Luke Hill.
It was pleasant and delightful on the midsummer's morn, when the green fields and the meadows they were buried in corn, and the blackbirds and thrushes sang on every tree, and the larks they sang melodious at the dawning of the day, and the larks they sang melodious. And the larks they sang melodious, and the larks they sang melodious, at the dawning of the day.
And he, about his third song, I can't really remember, he stepped forward with his concertina, and he played and sang.
Concertina.
Yeah. He played and sang, which I didn't even realize it was lyric, the theme to Green Sailors.
Oh, no way.
And it was actually Spanish Ladies. Farewell and adieu to you, fair Spanish ladies. And so I was listening to folk music before I knew that I was listening to folk music.
Right.
And I sort of I had no real knowledge or interest before I went away to join the Navy. So I started going to a jazz club in Dunfermline almost as soon as I got there. But the girls were very snooty in that. And but in the same venue, this little dank cellar, the Chalmers Street, on another night of the week, they had a folk music club. Notices are up on the wall, so I started going to that. And the girls were not so snooty there, and also you got to join in. You couldn't join in with the jazz club.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realise was at that time I was sitting at the feet of giants.
Right.
Yeah, I mean Archie Fisher was just this guy up the road who came down and occasionally sang a song.
Yeah.
But Belle Stewart would drop in, you know, with twin set and pearls and handbag clutched firmly here and be singing Jock Stewart because she was married to him. Willie, lost his name. Willie Scott, yeah, the old shepherd who had just, and people were rushing up from all over the south of England to record his repertoire. And he'd just stand there with an actual shepherd's crook that he had made out of a ram's horn. Just stand there and
the real deal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Great. Yeah,
So this time, because this was the next line of question for me. You mentioned the Navy. This time you're spending in folk clubs. This is before you joined the Navy.
Oh no,
You joined the
no.
Navy at 16.
No. I joined 2 weeks after my 16th birthday.
Why the Navy? What took you with that?
It seemed like a good idea at the time. My mother realized that she had some sort of responsibility for me earning a living, and she knew some people in the local city hall in Gloucester, and she was sort of sounding them out of having me as a draftsman apprentice. And I thought, well, yeah, I've got to do something. But then one day, I went to a much better school than I could ever have imagined. I went to Sir Thomas Rich's Grammar School for Boys. It was myself and about 2 or 3 others didn't really fit in. We'd just gotten there because we'd marked high in the 11 plus exams, right. And but everybody else in the school was going to be a member of Parliament or a surgeon or
Right.
Some big professional, and my mates and I were not going to be that. And one of them came in one day and I said, what's the matter? He said, I've just heard that I've failed my exam to join the Navy. News? What exam to join the Navy?
Right.
I said, oh, come on, we'll all take it. So we all individually applied for this, and none of the other bastards actually.
Figures, yeah.
So that was me. So suddenly I was in the Navy, and I went to tell my mum, and of course I never knew my father. My mother was my legal guardian. She could sign to have me cast adrift. Yeah, it was a sheer accident. But then I have realised over a long lifetime that for me, life is a series of connected accidents.
I like that.
You can check them all the way back. All these accidents. Some of them you had to wade through a pretty messy swamp, and other times somebody was giving you a ride in the back of a limo. But they were all accidents.
Would that be accident? Let's assume that's accident 1. What would be accident 2?
Accident 2. Okay. Well, accident 1 was being born to a single parent, a single mother in Ireland. Not a happy situation for any of us. And then when I was 10, sort of accident, this would be accident 2, would be my mother taking my sister and I to live in Gloucester, and me getting a better education than I was really expected to. Accident 3 was my mate failing his exam, and next accident.
I mean, you ended up in submarines at some point, so there's got to be an accident.
Yes, okay.
There
Well,
I was going to ask what the next question I have is.
Right, there you
What'd
go.
you do in the Navy?
I was a marine engineer, mainly steam and diesel, but also things like compressed air, hydraulics,
Yeah.
all refrigeration, air conditioning, that sort of stuff. But that was fine when I was in a classroom. But when they actually wanted me to go to sea, I found
4 years invested in Tom.
after 4 years, think of all that money they were investing in me, and then I found I was chronically and irrevocably seasick.
This happens.
Yeah.
Some people get that. Yeah.
And me and Lord Nelson, who knew? My favorite surface ship ever, in fact, my favorite posting at sea, was an old World War II tank landing ship. For engine power, it had a pair of 4-cylinder triple expansion 200-pound saturated steam reciprocating engines.
Do you know what that means? I was trying to follow.
Okay, if you see the movie The Sand Pebbles,
Yeah.
Steve McQueen's best movie,
Yeah.
if you see that, you actually see one of these engines because they use it.
Genuinely, what's it? So you end up on submarines, right?
Well, the thing is, I was on this ship in the Persian Gulf. As it was called then, it's now the Arabian Gulf. We know who has all the oil, don't we? And the Persian Gulf is like a mill pond. So if you're still throwing up when you're on that,
Right.
you're in real trouble. And so one of my messmates said, "Tom, I don't think you're gonna make this." He said, "You should join submarines." Really? Says I. Why? He said, "Because they don't move when they're dived." He was perfectly correct. The man had told me nothing more than the truth.
Right?
He hadn't told me all the truth, which is when they're on the surface, they roll like a bastard. They smell of diesel. So with the movement and the smell of diesel everywhere. So I joined submarines, and I never regretted it. It was the best. If you're gonna have to be in a military service, get on the smallest submarine you can find, and you're gonna be great. I never served in nuclear submarines because they have to shine their shoes, put creases in their trousers, cut their hair. We didn't do that stuff. We were pirates. In my songbook, we dug out a photograph of my engine room crew, and all just sort of dirty and bewhiskered, but I mean not like it wasn't a beard, it was whiskers, right. Yeah, and none of us is actually wearing uniforms. We're all wearing any bit of kit that you happen to have.
What's it like living on a submarine? Like, are you dived for most of the time, or you're not? Or?
Well, when you're going on patrol, as much as possible, you go on the surface to get to your patrol area, but then when you're getting close to it, you dive. And it's most of our patrols were. This was the Cold War, so most of our patrols were keeping an eye on what the Russians are doing, and a lot of it was in the Ice and Faroes Gap or the Faroes Greenland Gap, and you just had your submarine. You couldn't do this with nuclear submarines. Nuclear submarines are too noisy. Even the quiet ones are far too noisy. But a diesel-electric submarine, if you stop the diesels, you've only got the electric motors, and if you stop the electric motors, that's fine, and it's totally silent. So you'd sit at about 200 feet and just put one propeller, because of twin props, and put one propeller. Rudder amidships, one propeller turning very slowly, and that puts you going in a big circle. Sort of 60-mile circle. And you just sit there listening for transiting whiskies by. A whiskey was the NATO reference to a diesel-electric submarine, a Russian diesel-electric submarine that carried 3 ballistic missiles, and so we were wanting to track them coming out from around the north of Russia into the Atlantic.
You mentioned the other day when we were doing the radio interview that you had security clearance, and then you found out that later that there was, because you were hanging out in the folk clubs, there was a dossier on you?
There was a time when I went to join submarines, the very last day of my course, because you do on a very intensive 6-month course, on the very last day I came in, we were all petty officers or chief petty officers, and on each person's desk there was a request form. Everything in the Navy goes by request form. You want to go on leave? Request to see the captain by the first lieutenant to go on leave. You want to grow a beard? To see the captain via the first lieutenant to cease shaving. To cease shaving. They assume you're already shaving, and if you're having a beard, you want to take it off. To see the captain to recommence shaving. So there's this one, and it was already printed out there, and it said to volunteer for service in nuclear submarines. Everybody had one of those on his desk except me.
Okay.
I didn't have one. And he pulled down the board, one of these revolving blackboard things, and he said, "This is how you fill out this form." He said, "If you want to join the nuclear program, Tom, the divisional officer, wants to see you." And I went in, and I was told that were I to be considering volunteering for service in nuclear submarines, to think again, because I would not be acceptable. At that time, I had not the faintest wish to be in nuclear submarines, but when somebody tells you you can't do something, you know what that's like. And I went, "Why am I unacceptable?" He said, and he pulled out this thing with about 50 or 60 pages in it, and he said, "Let us say," he said, "that for security reasons, the civilians you've been keeping company with would not be acceptable."
Wow.
And because I'd been going to a folk club, and I can understand it really, because just about everybody, I mean, there was only me, everybody else was civilians.
Right.
And that luckily blighted my naval career for the whole 24 years. But they were all Scottish nationalists, or the one I liked was that there were some of them were registered anarchists.
That's good. Yeah, you could be an anarchist if you fill in the paperwork.
And communists and trade union organizers and things like this. Wow. So I was quite happily headed for diesel electric submarines, where everybody except the captain was known by their first name.
Now, at this point, we talked about not writing songs, but coming up with songs, sort of assembling songs.
There'd been no thought of me ever doing that. The only thing I knew in that regard was that I'd heard some people singing songs by a guy who had been in the Navy before me, and he had been in submarines before me, and he was an artificer in submarines before me, just like me, and his name was Cyril Tawney.
Yeah,
but I'd never met him.
Sorry to interrupt. Just before we jump into that, I'm curious. One last thing about the submarines and that. What would you do to pass the time when you
sleep?
Sleep. Okay.
A good in those days, you were told when you come in, a good submariner is a sleeping submariner. Okay. When you're on a diesel boat, the power is everything. The state of your battery is everything, as well as the state of the air. But normally it's power. So a good submariner, if he's sleeping, his body temperature lowers, takes less of the air conditioning. His breathing slows down, he's using less oxygen. He is not making noises for the Russians to hear. A good submariner is a sleeping submariner. And so that we would, I played bridge. Cards is not bad. One boat I was on, we were going to play
Mahjong.
Mahjong. Thank you very much. I lose words, I'm sorry, but hey, look what I've got instead. So yeah, we started trying, because we're out in Singapore, and there's some Mahjong, Chinese game of tiles, but it's a noisy game because you're always
Fucking
and but we were told in no uncertain terms, get that off. If you want to do that, do it in port.
wow. Okay.
And you take books to see and read, and but you'd lie in your bunk. You've got a little bunk, 6 foot 4 inches long, 18 inches high. It had a ventilation louver and a light and a curtain that came across. But you learned very quickly not to lie on your side, because your shoulders would be up against the bunk above, and if the guy came off watch and just swung himself into his bunk, you were going to get your clavicles crunched.
Oh. Yeah.
Wow.
Did
So-
you sing when the engines were running?
I did. When the engines were running, and that would be most often when you were just below the surface and you were doing snorkeling, which is a technique that we learned from the Germans in World War II. And so you can run the engines, and you have a little mask which goes up sucking in air. So you're refreshing the air and you're recharging the batteries.
Yeah.
But everything you do, the captains get obsessed with the state of the battery. So in the engine room, you wore these huge ear defenders, and because you had 2 V16s with superchargers screaming, and there was an aerial loop that ran around, an antenna, I suppose you should call it, around the engine room, so you could communicate with through a stick microphone, which looks as though somebody's trying to invent something decent for Frank Sinatra to sing through. It's horrible, and so you can communicate with your other hands in there, your engine room crew, communicate with the control room, whatever. But also, you're there. Nobody can hear you as long as you don't squeeze the microphone too hard. You can sing into it. Well, pretend you. I left my heart in San Francisco. You're throwing your raincoat over your shoulder.
So there was a little bit of music in the Navy.
In actual fact, at one point, due to the vagaries of postings, I actually spent 2 years on a large assault ship, and that was more like sort of being ashore while you're on a ship. Yeah. And we had the ship's folk group there.
Okay.
But that was great because we got free beer.
That is great.
Speaking of which,
Free beer, help yourself.
Fare thee well, my pretty young maids. We are bound for the Bay of Suvela. Away, the west wind's in our sails. We'll soon be back in Halifax, falling through the gale. Johnny cannot go to right. Them Frisco girls ain't got no clothes. Johnny cannot go to right. Timmy Roodunda, follow real da, whack follow riddle, Timmy Roodunda. Can't beat the old Paulina, you need not try, my sons. We judge all both great and small, from Dundee to St. John's.
So my second submarine was an old World War II A-class submarine out in Singapore. So I was based running out of Singapore for 2.5 years, and this was at the time of the great folk scare of the late 60s.
Right.
And there were folk clubs going on all over the island of Singapore, but they were all on service bases. Although none in any of the Navy bases, so only the Army and the Air Force. And suddenly arriving on the island was this guy coming in from Hong Kong, Johnny Collins. And I was there. He had just he'd arrived with his wife and 2 children. His wife was Chinese, Lil, and they arrived at the Air Force base, and he got transport and taken to a married quarter, and he put down his case and he picked up his guitar and ordered a taxi to take him to Tenga Folk Club, and he walked in the door and life changed because this was a genuine semi-professional,
Right.
and with just and he just stood on stage and he sang with a guitar, which is unusual for him. He sang, "Crack, crack goes the whip, I whistle and I sing. I sits upon my wagon, I'm as happy as a king. My horse is always willing and I am never sad. There's none can lead a jollier life than Jim the Carter lad." And
So that was
God, yeah, and so we all had to up our game, and Johnny Collins and I remained friends until he died.
And were you singing and performing by that point, or
Not at all.
No, okay.
Not at all. But he opened a folk club. He was a lab tech with the British Army Medical Corps, and so that was at Changi Hospital, previously Changi Prisoner of War Camp. And my then wife and I, who had been to folk clubs in Scotland, knew a couple of songs, and so we got up and sang a couple of Scottish traditional songs. And at the end of the evening, he handed us an envelope, and there was £5 in there. And he said, "Oh no," he said, "anybody who sings in my club gets paid."
Nice.
And but Johnny was just a lovely, lovely, lovely man, and one of the sweetest voices. Not sweet in the conventional sense, but if you listen even today to a Johnny Collins recording, you can hear him smiling. True, isn't it? So I learned a lot from him, and of course a lot of the songs I sing, I'm channeling Johnny. Lynn said, "You're sounding like Johnny again." I said, "It's not a bad thing."
Not a bad thing. Yeah. When did you start, and when did you decide? Okay, I'm gonna follow this. This is my path. Never.
No, not until I was about 43, because having left the Navy, and having met Lynn, and we wanted to often have an adventure, so we actually bought ourselves a small business in British Columbia,
Right.
up in the Rockies.
Of course, you lived in Canada for 30 years.
Yeah, but we were living in the middle of nowhere, actually I think about 15 miles beyond the middle of nowhere. And so we had this engineering business, which that was part of the points system that I managed to accrue points to come in, and but there was no business essentially. There was a rock to push uphill, but by some weird mechanism that I've never understood, I had actually at that time written 2 songs, Last Shanty and Marching Inland, and Johnny Collins and Jim McGain, his senior partner, had recorded one on each of the first 2 albums. And
Now, how did that happen? Had you recorded a version yourself?
No.
Or?
No, they were looking for songs, and they said, "Tom, you know that one you sing."
Yeah. So they'd heard you sing it.
They'd heard me sing it in various folk clubs and festivals around.
That was before you moved to Canada, then?
Before it is, yes. So you caught me out in a lie there. Yeah, it's true.
That's what I say. It's just a fact check. That's all we're doing. This whole show. Let's get into the truth.
Okay. No, you see, I hadn't written the song. I made it up while I was in the engine room, and I sang it. So it was imprinted in my head. I mean, actually writing the words down didn't happen until Johnny Collins said, you know, that's a good song. We'd like to record that. Would you give us a copy of the words? Well, yes, I will as soon as I've written them down. And that's what I said. I write down songs because they're already in there.
That's interesting because the more I've been kind of going down the rabbit hole, the shanties are really an oral tradition. It's something that it only got written down as they're about to disappear or when someone wants to publish them.
That's very true. You know, you know, the early people who were doing this were not ethnomusicologists or anything. Joanna Colcord was a ship's captain's daughter, and she amassed a group of songs called Songs of the Shanty Men and Shanty Boys, Songs of the Sailorman and Lumberman.
And they didn't really think they were writing these songs. They didn't really consider it music from what I got.
Well, of course, until Stan Hugel was persuaded to write down all the songs that he has in Shanties from the Seven Seas, nobody put music in the book.
Oh, just the lyrics.
There's no sense of the music line, the melody line, in any of those old songs.
And there's definitely no, even in the shanties from the Seven Seas, no indication of what the answer part sounds like. No indication of what the harmonies might have been like.
Well, although they just didn't do that. They were chants, so that lends more credence to the CHANTY than SH.
We did get the nod from.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna go sound check.
I'm marching inland from the shore. Over my shoulder I'm carrying an oar. When someone asks me what is the funny thing you got, then I know I'll never go to sea no more. No more. Then I know I'll never go to sea no more. Hey! The long pull and the strong pull. So all well, you better men brace and raise away the lee. Hoist jibs and topsails, let the ship go free. Hurrah, boys, hurrah! We sing the Jubilee. It's done the Royal Navy, that's a merchant ship for me. I fought for me king and me country while I sailed on the ocean blue in the eye. All the crew was in despair. Some rushed here and some rushed there. But the captain sat in the captain's chair and played a ukulele as the ship went down. Now tell me, Mr. Barber, how do you share your customers? Way, hey, sing sunny door. Hey, hey, away we go, donkey riding, donkey riding. Hey, hey, away we go, riding on a donkey. And the boy went fishing and drowned. I had a bottle of 90 proof. Bottom of the lake, boy Johnny. I take one drink, you take two. And the boy went fishing and drowned. We sing, poor Johnny at the bottom of the lake. The bottom of the lake, poor Johnny. Poor Johnny at the bottom of the lake. And the boy went fishing and drowned. Twing on a ding, twing of a night, oh. With me twing of a night, with me robo, Randy. And me lasso keeps beating away. Now my wife, she is humpy, she's lumpy. My wife, she's the devil, she's cracked. And no matter what I may do with her tongue it goes click-click-click-clack. Below, 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 ho! Way ho, below, below, so the sugar in the hole below. Way ho, below, below, so the sugar in the hole below.
All right, so you can see we've moved locations. A couple few days later, and we're a few hundred kilometers south from Ottawa, back in sunny Toronto today at Union Sound. So we're spending a day in the studio.
So we left off last we were chatting. You're in Singapore, meeting Johnny Collins.
Yeah, the world moved definitely. Singapore, it was great. I had my first paid gig. I got £5.
So your first paid gig was in Singapore? Oh, right,
No,
because you were there with the base.
I didn't realize it was a paid gig until we were going out the door, and then my then wife Kathy, as she then was, Kate now, Johnny handed us an envelope with
How did that
£5
feel?
in it. Confusing.
No, because honestly, the reason that I ask is I have a distinct memory of the first time that James handed me $20 for singing with Pressgang.
Yeah.
And I got emotional. I was like, oh man, someone's paying me to sing, really? Like, that happens?
Yeah, and then so off I went, and I was just going around folk clubs with my car and a sleeping bag and stuff like that. Went to and at Christchurch, the Red Lion Folk Club in Christchurch, not in New Zealand. I saw that my old mate Johnny Collins was the featured act one Sunday evening.
Were you assembling songs at this time? Were you putting songs together yet, or?
Not really, but that was about to start.
Okay.
And I was at sea, back on a submarine, and I was in the engine room listening to two V16 supercharged diesels.
Right. Cool.
And we'd just been down in the studio with cans, where we had huge ones on there,
Yeah.
and you could sing as loud as you want, whatever you wanted. The Russians couldn't hear you because all they could hear was the diesel engines, and knew there was a diesel electric submarine in the area. So suddenly, don't haul on the rope, don't climb up the mast.
Don't haul on the rope, don't climb up the mast. If you see a sailing ship, it might be your last. Just get your savings ready for another round ashore. The sailor ain't a sailor anymore.
Don't know what was going on in my head at the time, but had I not, and you see that we were talking about writing songs, and I just wrote it down later, actually probably more than a year later after I had the song. Actually, Johnny Collins wanted the words, so I wrote down the song. That was it. He and Jim McGeehan, who had become great friends by that time, were looking for material for a second album. So, Tom, have you got a song? Another one, as though I was a songwriter, you see. And we were down at Sidmouth, the International Folk Festival at Sidmouth, and with Lynn, and she found I kept disappearing into the loos with other men. But that was where the great harmonies could resonate.
Do you find that you come up with the lyrics first and the melody afterwards, or is it not necessarily in an order? It kind of just comes to you?
Yeah, both at the same time.
Yeah.
At the same time, and I cannot prove this, but I have a belief that every section of words in the English language, anyway, has within it an innate melody and rhythm. The spoken word can very easily be transmitted in cadence. And it has its own ways of making a tune, so, and I just follow that. So I allow myself to be guided by that, and that's stood up for me over quite a few years now. Is that poetry that really speaks to me? Actually sings to me.
Right. Yeah. And you did that arrangement of that poem at Salter Street. Last night.
150 days.
Yeah, 150 days out from Vancouver. 150 days out from Vancouver. Can't you hear them all singing it over and over? 150 days longer to roam, or less, if you're lucky, to England and home. Oily leaned on the taffrail to watch the day dying like a flock of gay birds round the royal yards flying. High o'er the sunset I saw the young moon, and the wind and the tide, they were singing one tune. 150 days out from Vancouver, can't you hear them all singing it over and over? 150 days longer to roam, or less if you're lucky, to England and home. And I can still remember that coming to me. We were living in Salmo, and we were trailer trash. We had a lovely trailer on a lovely 2 acres of land with a great view, and it was a beautiful day, just like this. And Lynn was hanging out the washing between the only two. The place where we lived had been an orchard and was now a meadow, but there were 2 sort of weed trees had grown up, and there was a washing line strung between them. We never cut the grass, so at this point it must have been late summer, because it should have been a movie done in slow motion, right. Because I was running down going 150 days out from Vancouver, and Lynn's looking around and what is this? Yes, just that I heard that melody.
Yeah. As you recite, so are you reciting poetry? Are you reading it aloud to yourself?
Pretty
so you're
much.
reading it, and then
I'm
the melody
declaiming it, yes, and then I had this. And the first person I wanted to tell was Lynn. Listen to this! I was singing it. We never cut the grass, so the grass was about 4 feet high, and I was running through the grass to do that. So that's my. I don't have a process, and I don't now get involved in songwriting workshops at festivals or something, because I've had too many people being precious and telling me that I've been told we just did it today on the fly.
That's right.
I've been told, oh, you should never change the song after you've got it. You're not being true to the song.
You know what's been tripping me up this whole time is with wings as sharp as razors.
Yes.
Send down a dove with wings as sharp as razors to cut the throats of their blokes. One sells bad beer to sailors.
Yes.
Beaks as sharp as razors.
That's my little, not quite, but Mondegreen.
Yeah.
It's the book, Charles McHardy, I think so, of Send Down a Dove. It's the finest book about wartime submarining that you're ever going to get, and it's just the author grabbed the hierarchy of what happens on a military vessel, and in Send Down a Dove, it's nearly the end of the Second World War. Everybody knows it's going to be over within days, but the Admiralty want to send a submarine into the Baltic, which is essentially too shallow for submarines to operate safely. I mean, safely from the enemy. They're not going to.
Right.
And the only person who really wants to do this is the captain, because he wants to stay in the Navy after the war, so he needs the medals and the recommends and everything else. And nobody else is keen on this. This could be a death sentence and a suicide mission and all the rest of it. However, they do survive that, and right in the closing pages of the book, after the war, 2 of the members of the crew are at Euston Station, and they just happen to pass each other, and they stop for a chat, and one of them says, whatever happened to Nobby? You remember Nobby? He used to sing, "O Lord above, send down a dove," and I read that and remembered it, but when I got the song, I didn't have a copy of the book, and it had been quite a few years since I'd read it. So I was going with beak as sharp as razors.
Interesting.
And it's the first album, so there are 12 songs on it, 11 of mine and one of Cyril Tawney, Diesel and Shale.
Yeah, great tune.
Was it Diesel and Shale?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, Diesel and Shale. And I sent him 2 cassettes. And he wrote back, beautiful handwritten, he had lovely copperplate writing. So, and he wrote back and said, like what you've done with the song, thank you very much, great. And then as a little postscript, he said, of course, I'm sure you're well aware that it's wings as sharp as razors, but you've changed it for your own purposes. Oh, no.
And of course, Cyril Tawney would know because he was a submariner and he would have come across the book.
Absolutely.
And,
Well, he was Cyril was a great folklorist. I mean, which I think was a gift to his writing, because he was taking all that folk stuff, the heritage stuff, and just cramming it together. If you look at if you just take his songs as written words, there's so much of his own particular tradition crammed in there, which wasn't tradition at the time. It was just what was happening to him and everybody else in the world. It was just, but after a while, that becomes passé and moulders down into folklore. So Cyril wrote back and said that. So I decided I would change that to the correct wings as sharp as razors. Except for a couple of years there, people were coming up to me after correcting me. It's beak as sharp as no, and I'd have to go into this long, involved explanation. And so I went back to singing beak, and then eventually I said, no, this is we've got to buckle down here. And
the thing you said about Cyril Tawney there, that his songs contain his folklore, his tradition. What was going on? Is that, would you describe your own songs that way?
I'm too close to them. That's for somebody else to judge in 20 years. But there's all this stuff. Skippers in the wardroom drinking gin. Okay, now gin is cheap. That's why Royal Navy officers drink gin, or they drink cheap brandy and ginger ale, which is called a horse's neck for whatever reason. But skippers in the wardroom drinking gin. Chicken on a raft is a fried egg on fried bread.
Oh, skippers in the wardroom drinking gin.
Hi-ho, chicken on a raft.
I don't mind knocking, but I ain't going in.
Hi-ho, chicken on a raft. Oh, chicken on a raft on a Monday morning. Oh, what a terrible sight to see. Tato's part of the Dutchman. Sitting there picking on a chicken on a raft.
But it's not as we know it, gin. It's deep fried egg, because they're frying 100 of these at a time.
Yeah.
And the raft is a piece of just ordinary crappy white bread.
Oh, okay.
Put in that and fried until it's got the consistency of a roof tile.
Sorry, the white bread, the soft bread goes into the deep fryer.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I thought it was
And then
hardtack.
each one gets put out, and the egg is essentially a globe.
Yeah.
And don't let it. Well, if you do let it drop off your plate, it doesn't matter, because it'll bounce high enough for you to catch it and put it back on. So that's part of his everyday experience. But eventually, it becomes folklore.
That reminds me of David Francie had a similar quote about that. He's saying all these things we think of as traditional music, like Johnny going off to fight Napoleon.
Yeah.
That's traditional at this point, but back then it was just the current events. It was sort of the news of the day.
It was, yeah. That's very observant. Yeah. So so a couple of songs came along, and then it came my 40th birthday, and it's time for Lynn and I to go off to the other side of the world and have an adventure. And we bought a small business up in the middle of nowhere in the Rocky Mountains of British Columbia, which is fine, but there was a very small population and no business.
Right.
We arrived there in June of '83. In May of '84, I found myself down at the Northwest Folklife Festival in Seattle, the biggest free festival in the world at that time. It was absolutely great. The hospitality, the hostility room was well kitted out with beer and coffee and everything else. And there was a song session going on, so I waited till things quietened down. You know, just that you've got to get in there, just that right moment. You all know this one. Yeah, everybody's got a song, but you got to just get in.
Somebody does
German Hall.
And I started singing Last Shanty, and as soon as I started the chorus, they were all singing along. And well, this is great. I got to the end of the song. How come people know this song, says I. I said, well, it comes from the singing of Johnny Collins and Jim McGeehan, and some of our crowd were over at Mystic, and they saw them there, and they brought this song back, and I sort of, would they believe me if I tell them that I wrote this thing? But there was a whole crowd of Anglophile folkies around Seattle, and just...
And did you tell them?
But oh yeah, absolutely, and they didn't have any problem with that. But they also, of course, knew Marching Inland, which so suddenly I was
a star.
Okay, you're part of the group. You know, that's fine. Made some lifetime friends down there. On Friday afternoon, I would be there revving the engine. Keep the motor going, Bugsy, and get Lynn, and we would have packed the night before, off down to Spokane, hit I-90, turn right, get round to Seattle about 11:30 midnight, find the pub, there till 1 o'clock. Everybody's now going home. They've worked a hard week, and then we had Saturday together, Sunday brunch, drive back up I-90 and get our music socializing fix.
I wonder if there's still a scene out there, because I'd heard that there's a
huge
Friday night every last Friday of the month they do a big sing in Seattle.
We actually everybody we hung out with was in or loosely associated with a group that I think a band that may still be going, but I sort of doubt it, called the Daily Flash, who had been the Daily Flash for 30 years at that time.
Wow.
And
so
Barry Curtis, who co-wrote Louie.
Oh no,
was part of the group, you know. And
so what I wanted to ask was, like, when did you make that transition from, hey, singing shanties is something I do with my friends in the social scene, and I've got a couple songs and people know them, they're getting recorded, to, okay, now it's my turn on stage as Tom Lewis, singing my own songs.
We had wound up the business because there wasn't any business, got into another business with a guy we thought was a friend who was actually a junkie's junkie, and that had eventually gone tits up. But Lynn said, "Don't sweat it. You know, got a decent job. We've got benefits and all the rest of it. Just sit and take it easy," because I was fried. I was really burned out.
You'd stopped singing, which is the only time in our married life not to sing. I knew there was a problem.
So some friends said, "Hey, there's a thing on called This Business of Music, which is like a survival course for low-level musicians down at the Okanagan Summer School of the Arts." I went down there, came back all fired up. You know, I want to record an album, and so we actually knew people with a recording studio, with musical skills, with production skills, singing, loads and loads of singers. So went down, did that. Well, yeah, I suppose really we should maybe try and make some sort of tour and sell all these. The big decision at that time was whether to have 300 cassettes or 500 cassettes.
You know the feeling.
Heather Wood at that time, Heather Wood of the Young Tradition,
Of course,
had put out a little book, which of people and names and numbers to contact, which of course is out of date before it gets to the printer.
Right.
But we had that and put together a sort of a little tour, but there was no money in it. I would go away for 4 or 5 or 6 weeks and come back with $200.
Wait, hold up. No money in shanties?
Hard to believe in this day and age.
Boys,
isn't it?
what are we doing?
And so after the second tour, I came back to find out a mutiny on my hands, and Lynn was there saying, "Look, Buster, when you were a sailor, that was part of the deal. Yeah, fine, off you go. I'll see you when you come back. But we're supposed to be here now. You're not a sailor anymore." And I said, I thought, yeah, we need to rethink this. So I said, "You're right. Well, I'm a welder. I've got welding skills. I can get a job pretty much anywhere, even out in the West Kootenay of British Columbia." And I said, "That's it, fine, I'll stop." And she said, No, you mistake me, sir. She said, "I want to come with you." So we rearranged our life so that we had no debt at all, no monthly outgoings, and stepped off the edge of the world.
Wow.
And we sort of said, well, if we're going to do this, because the first tour barely covered its own expenses, and so if we're going to do this, we need to sort of have a think of how we're going to do it and whether it works or not. So I said, we'll set a date 2 years hence, and we will sit down and review what's happened and go, no go. And so we had that meeting, but we didn't reach any conclusion. The only conclusion we reached was, let's give it another 2 years and see what happens. We never had that meeting at the 4-year point. We moved out for a little while to Nova Scotia because there was more of our kind of music in Nova Scotia than there was in British Columbia. And also, you could drive from Halifax to Boston in a long, hard day, but then you were into what Stan Rogers called folk singer heaven,
Right.
where there was just gigs everywhere. And that was it, really. Then so we spent somewhere between 2 and 3 years resident in Halifax. Then we took our camper van and went on the road for 18 months. In the days before the internet, before cell phones, before anything, it was tough. It was tough. And at one point we just decided we need to go back to British Columbia. And then the road just keeps on winding, and as John Williamson from Australia famously put in a song, said, "The windshield is just a travelling picture show." We love it. We've got friends all over the world. We've got songs all over the world. It's folk music. Wouldn't change it.
Amazing.
Wouldn't change it.
Well, Tom, listen, we're thrilled to have gotten to spend so much time with you and get to sing with you both on stage and in the studio. Obviously, the very first time I ever sang on stage was with you at the age of 11 in Pettitangwasheen. So to kind of get the chance to do it again has been just such a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure. We will astound those people who buy your new album and go, "Wait a minute."
That's the plan.
All right.
That's the plan.
Good.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where's our root canal man?
Yeah, he's around somewhere. Poor old Tim.
And the wild waves cleft behind us seem to murmur as they flow. There are
loving arms that wait you in the land to which you go. Rolling home, rolling home, rolling home, rolling home across the sea, rolling home to Nova Scotia, rolling home, dear land, to thee.
Yeah, everything that I've recorded is available on Bandcamp. Hooray for Bandcamp! There's that. I have apparently a channel on YouTube.
Okay.
I couldn't actually go to it very easily, but you will sort it out.
I will, yeah.
You youngsters.
Your website.
And the website is so simple.
Yeah.
TomLewis.net.
All right, TomLewis.net.
TomLewis.net.
We'll get the rest of your links for your YouTube channel and all the rest of everything else. Pick up some Tom Lewis content. Go and check that out. So
Thank you very much.
Yeah.